My name is Claire Maddox, and the day I realized I was no longer welcome in my own brother's house was the day everything inside me changed. His wife accused me of living like a princess, while he stood behind her, rinsing dishes in silence. I said nothing then, but if you stay with me, you'll see exactly how I turned that silence into the loudest revenge they never saw coming. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching this from. Drop your city in the comments. And if you've ever been made to feel small in a place that once felt like home, this story might just hit too close. The kitchen always smelled like cinnamon and soap, Melissa's favorite scented sponge and Josh's weekend pancakes. But that morning, under the hiss of the kettle and the clink of ceramic mugs, everything felt off. Tighter. I could feel it before I even entered the room. Melissa stood by the stove, her arms crossed, lips pursed like she was sucking on a lemon. Josh, my older brother, was at the sink, rinsing dishes with the quiet focus of someone pretending not to hear what's coming. "Did you really just spend 45 minutes in the shower?" Melissa said, without turning. Her voice was sharp, clean-cut, like the knives she always kept perfectly aligned in the block. I blinked. I didn't realize. I'll be quicker next time." "You never realize anything," she snapped. Now she turned, spatula in hand like it might point to a greater truth. "You just float around like this is some kind of spa retreat. Hot water, fresh towels, everything laid out for your majesty." I flushed, heat rushing up my neck. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" Josh rinsed a plate, eyes glued to the faucet stream. Not a word. The silence from him said more than any accusation. My big brother, the one who once glued my shoelaces together as a prank, now stood motionless, letting his wife's words pile up like the dirty dishes I hadn't gotten to yet. Melissa kept going. "You know, Claire, most people don't have the luxury of staying in bed till 10, or having their laundry magically folded, or living rent-free while the rest of us juggle bills and real life. I've been looking for work," I said, softer than I meant to. "And I've been helping." "Helping," she laughed once, a dry, brittle sound. "You vacuumed the guest room last week. Shall I build a statue in your honor?" "Melissa," Josh murmured, finally. A word. She whipped her head toward him. "What, am I wrong?" He said nothing, just scrubbed harder at a stubborn dish. The kettle screamed, the sound rising like a pressure valve about to blow. I moved to pour my tea, hands shaking slightly. I didn't know what stung more, her sarcasm or his silence. I hadn't meant to overstay. When I flew down from Portland after losing my marketing job and that terrible breakup with Lucas, Josh had said, "Stay as long as you need, we've got you." And I believed him. I always believed him. But it had been 3 months. 3 months of trying to breathe again. Of job interviews that led nowhere. Of pretending Melissa's pinched smiles meant welcome and not resentment. The sun spilled through the window in sharp slats, slicing Melissa's face into angles and shadows. She was beautiful, I'd always admitted that. But there was something cold in her eyes now, like she'd long since decided who I was, and nothing I said could undo it. "I'll be faster with the shower," I said again, because I didn't know what else to say. Melissa didn't respond. She turned back to the stove, flipping pancakes with exaggerated care, like the breakfast itself deserved more attention than me. Josh reached for a towel, drying his hands. His eyes finally met mine for a split second, but there was nothing in them. Not anger, not comfort, just tiredness. That was worse somehow. I wanted to scream, to demand he say something, anything. That I was his sister. That I was trying, that I didn't deserve to be spoken to like this. But instead, I pressed my lips into a thin line, took my tea, and walked out, the mug shaking just enough to spill a few drops on the floor. No one followed me. No one called after me. And in that moment, I realized something sharp and cruel. I wasn't part of this home. I was an inconvenience wearing borrowed pajamas. But if Melissa thought I'd stay quiet forever, she didn't know me at all. Dinner that night was served with a side of silence. The dining table sat square in the middle of the open-plan space, framed by low-hanging lights and a centerpiece of fake succulents. Melissa had made baked salmon, wild rice, and those tiny charred broccoli florets she liked. Everything was plated beautifully. It always was. Josh stabbed a piece of broccoli like it had wronged him personally. Melissa didn't say a word. And me? I tried to be invisible. I sat across from them, napkin folded perfectly on my lap, my fork barely touching the food. The tension was so thick you could butter it and call it dessert. "So," I started, my voice cracking just a bit before I cleared my throat. "Dinner's great, thank you for cooking." Melissa blinked slowly. Her wine glass paused midair. Still no words. Josh gave a little grunt, almost a laugh, almost a sigh. "It's just stress," he muttered, finally. "Don't take it to heart." That was his olive branch. Half dead and dipped in indifference. "Of course," I replied, trying to smile. "I know it's a full house. I want to help more around the house, really." Melissa finally looked up, her gaze cool and unreadable. It wasn't agreement. It wasn't refusal. It was just noise, a dismissal in one syllable. I focused on my plate. The rice had gone cold. My stomach, knotted from the morning's humiliation, didn't want food anyway. I took a small bite just to fill the silence, chewing as quietly as possible. The clink of cutlery echoed through the space like awkward punctuation marks. Josh poured himself another glass of water, the ice clattering against the glass too loud, too sharp. Nobody asked about my day. Nobody asked about my job search. Nobody asked how I was feeling. I watched them talk without talking, Melissa's eyebrow twitches, Josh's quiet shifts in his chair. The glances they exchanged like Morse code behind enemy lines. It was clear this was no longer a safe space. I was a tenant in a house without rent, a guest overstaying her welcome, and worst of all, a burden too polite to be thrown out. Yet I tried again. "I could take over grocery runs or meal prep. Whatever helps, I know you're both busy." Josh opened his mouth like he might respond, but Melissa's hand rested lightly on his arm. He closed it again like a dog trained off instinct. "I'll let you know," she said, sipping her wine. Her lipstick left a faint coral print on the rim. "We have a system." A system. Right. I nodded, murmured something about needing an early night, and pushed back my chair. My fork hadn't made it past the salmon. My tea from that morning still sat untouched on the coffee table. As I carried my plate to the sink, I heard Josh say under his breath, "You didn't have to be so hard on her." Melissa didn't lower her voice. "She wants to help now, after 3 months of playing house guest. She's lucky I haven't said more." I stopped in the hallway, out of sight but not out of earshot. Josh didn't respond. Just another silence, his signature move these days. I crept down the hall, every step feeling heavier than the last. My room, technically the guest room, was cold, too neat, too staged, like it belonged to a catalog, not a person. I sat on the bed and stared at the pale beige walls. My reflection in the full-length mirror looked small somehow, smaller than usual. My shoulders were curled inward, my eyes tired, my lips pressed tight. I had no income. No car, I'd sold it before the move. No real plan beyond get back on my feet. But what hit hardest wasn't the instability. It was the quiet shift happening between me and Josh. He used to call me Chloe, a childhood nickname that stuck even in college. We used to text movie quotes back and forth during the day. I was the sister who helped him propose to Melissa. I even kept her ring size a secret for a month. Now he didn't even meet my eyes. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. Each rotation was a thought. How did I end up here? What did I do to make her hate me? And why was he letting her? I closed my eyes and exhaled through my teeth, trying not to cry. Again. The walls felt thinner than ever. And the worst part, I still couldn't tell whether I should fight harder to belong, or start figuring out how to leave. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, slicing the room into stripes of warmth and cold. I was already awake, had been since before dawn. Sleep had become a stranger lately. I just lay there most nights, staring at the ceiling, waiting for it to be late enough to move without disturbing anyone. I tiptoed past the kitchen and down to the laundry room, clutching a basket filled with everyone's clothes. My own laundry had been piling up in my corner of the guest room, and I'd figured, maybe this would help. Maybe a clean set of folded shirts would soften Melissa's edges. The laundry room smelled faintly of lavender detergent and lemon floor cleaner. I lined everything up. Josh's button-downs, Melissa's tank tops, my own stretched-out t-shirts, and began folding. Neatly. Precisely. Corners aligned like little origami shapes of peace offerings. I had just placed the last shirt into Josh's stack when I heard her voice behind me. "You folded them too soft." I turned. Melissa stood at the door, a cup of coffee in one hand, her robe barely tied. She hadn't brushed her hair yet. It frizzed in all directions, a halo of irritation. "Sorry," I asked, blinking. She walked in slowly, her gaze sweeping over the piles. "Josh's shirts. You fold them like he's royalty, all smooth and careful. He's going to expect me to do that now." I was just trying to help. I didn't ask for help. The words sliced sharper than I expected, not because they were cruel exactly, but because they were so precise, so final. Melissa looked at me for a long moment as if sizing up whether I'd argue. When I didn't, she gave a small, humorless smile. "You're good at playing the innocent, like everything you do is just sweet and harmless. But that's not how it feels, Claire." My throat tightened. "I'm not playing anything." She didn't answer. Just sipped her coffee, her eyes scanning the laundry baskets like they were full of evidence. "You know," she added almost casually, "Josh used to say you were the fun one in the family. The messy spark. The artist, the wanderer." "I didn't know that," I said cautiously. "Yeah, well, that was before you moved into my house and turned it into your refuge." Something about the way she said "my house" made my stomach twist. She turned and walked away, her slippers dragging softly against the tile. I stood frozen for a moment, the scent of warm cotton rising from the laundry like a memory I didn't belong to anymore. Then I sat on the dryer, suddenly exhausted. Melissa wasn't just irritated with me. She resented me. Deeply. Personally. It wasn't about the water bill or the folded shirts or even the time in the shower. It was something else entirely. Something closer to territory. Identity. Marriage. Josh and I had grown up with a mother who never stopped cleaning, a dad who worked 3 jobs and shared bunk beds until I was 16. We were survivors, he and I, we built each other. And now, I felt like an old blueprint someone was trying to erase. Back in my room, I stared at my duffel bag. It sat half-zipped at the foot of the bed like a question I wasn't ready to answer. Leave. And go where? Stay. And keep sinking. The walls in this house weren't just tight, they were starting to close in. I used to think Melissa was simply tough, blunt, maybe even a little territorial, the way any woman might be when her sister-in-law moves in uninvited. But this morning felt different, like I'd crossed some invisible line I didn't even know existed, like I'd triggered something she couldn't control, or maybe something she didn't want to admit, because the truth was I didn't have much, but I still had something Melissa feared. And I wasn't sure yet what that meant. I didn't expect the doorbell. No one ever came over unannounced, not in this house. Melissa had a calendar for everything. Groceries, vet appointments, even when the basil needed repotting. The unexpected wasn't welcome here. But that morning, just after noon, I heard the ding, and then his voice. "Where's my girl?" I froze in the hallway. My heart leapt, then stumbled. I turned the corner just as the front door swung open. There he was, Dad. Gray at the temples now, his Oregon windbreaker half-zipped and still holding that beat-up leather duffel that had seen more camping trips than I could count. He was beaming, broad, unfiltered joy. The kind that made your chest ache because you hadn't felt it in months. I was in his arms before I could think. "Claire Bear," he said into my hair. "I swear you've shrunk. Are they starving you here?" I laughed, tears springing up too fast to hide. "Dad, what are you doing here?" He pulled back, grinning. "Surprising you, obviously. You didn't return my last 3 calls, so I figured something was up. Drove halfway through the night." My throat tightened. I had ignored his calls, not because I didn't want to talk, but because I didn't know how to explain. Josh appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Hey, Dad," he said, clearly startled. "Didn't expect you today." "Exactly the point," Dad replied, giving him a hug with one arm still slung over my shoulder. "Had a wild hair, wanted to see my kids, it's been too long." Melissa emerged from the hallway. Her face did that thing where she smiled, but only her mouth got the message. "Hi, Paul, we weren't expecting company." "Neither was I when I woke up this morning," he said cheerfully, "and yet here I am." She didn't respond, just gave a tight smile and retreated to the kitchen. But Dad's joy was a storm, and he didn't notice the cold front. "Come on, let's sit down," he said, tugging me toward the living room. "I brought that old photo album, remember the one from Yellowstone?" I did. It was one of those huge leather-bound ones with the plastic sleeves that crackled when you turned the pages. It smelled like campfires and old glue. He pulled it from his duffel and plopped it on the coffee table with a thud that echoed in the room like a drumbeat. and for the first time in weeks, I laughed freely. We sat on the rug like kids, flipping pages. My fourth-grade haircut, the one where I tried to trim my bangs myself. Josh with braces. Dad in a cowboy hat he refused to take off for the entire summer. The photo of me mid-cartwheel, half-blurred and joyous. "I remember this day," Dad said, tapping a photo of me perched on a boulder. "You were mad at your mom because she wouldn't let you eat marshmallows for breakfast. She said they weren't real food," I grinned. "She also said camping wasn't a real vacation," Dad chuckled. "And yet, that was the best summer we ever had." I nodded, my smile fading a little. "It really was." We kept flipping through the album, the pages full of color and dirt and wildness, every memory louder than the house around us. Melissa returned eventually, carrying a tray of drinks she hadn't been asked to make. "Tea," she offered, her voice carefully neutral. Dad took a mug without looking. "Thanks, Mel, you guys sure keep a quiet house. Thought I was walking into a library." I looked up just in time to see her flinch. Josh cleared his throat. "It's just been busy, work's been a lot." "Too busy to answer your sister's calls?" Dad asked, raising an eyebrow. "You know Claire used to call me every Sunday night like clockwork. Haven't heard from her since she moved in." Melissa turned toward the hallway. "Excuse me," she muttered, disappearing again. Dad lowered his voice. "What's her deal?" I shrugged. "It's been tense." He sighed and leaned back. "I hate that. You two always got along so well when you were younger." I didn't have the heart to explain that we never really had, not in the way he remembered. Melissa and I had been polite at best. But I also didn't want to ruin his moment. He was trying to hold something together, even if it had long since frayed. Later, Josh offered to order takeout, but Dad insisted on grilling burgers. "I didn't drive 800 miles to eat soggy noodles," he said. "Let's fire up that grill. I'll even let Claire put the cheese on." I smiled, for real this time. Out on the patio, while the sun lowered behind the Arizona palms, I watched Dad tell stories. He made Josh laugh. He teased me for my vegetarian phase. He brought life back into the air like someone had thrown open a long-sealed window. But every time I glanced at Melissa through the glass, standing inside, her arms folded, watching, I saw it. That tight smile, that unreadable stare. And it hit me, this wasn't just tension. This was a slow war. And now, for the first time since I arrived, the battleground was shifting. Dinner was quieter than it had any right to be. Melissa had insisted on something light since Dad had grilled earlier. She arranged a salad with pecans and goat cheese, drizzled balsamic with near-surgical precision, and placed slices of baguette on a ceramic platter like it was an art exhibit. Dad complimented the food, of course. He always did. He believed gratitude could fix most things. Undercooked chicken, burnt rice, awkward silences. But this wasn't about food. It was about control. I could feel it in the way Melissa set the table just so, folded napkins like we were dining at a vineyard. She didn't sit until everyone else did. And when she finally lowered herself into the seat across from me, it was with the cool stillness of a person rehearsing every word she was about to say. Josh reached for the salad tongs. "Claire, you want some more?" I smiled. "I'm good, thanks." Melissa sipped her wine. Dad buttered his bread. The ceiling fan whirred above us, then Melissa tilted her head. "Claire, have you thought about next steps, long term?" My fork paused midway to my mouth. I glanced at her. "Next steps?" She nodded, her expression neutral, almost pleasant. "It's been a few months. I imagine you've got a plan brewing." Josh shifted beside her. His hand froze over his plate. Dad looked up, frowning slightly. I thought I had a little more time," I said quietly. "I've been interviewing, just nothing stuck yet." Melissa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, it's just, sometimes we get comfortable and forget that comfort isn't always permanent." I looked at Josh. His jaw was tight. He wasn't chewing. He wasn't speaking, just staring at his plate like it might dissolve. Dad set down his fork. "Are you saying Claire's overstayed her welcome?" Melissa's eyebrows rose just a little. "I'm saying this house runs on balance. Energy in, energy out. It's not personal." Not personal. I let those words roll around in my head like marbles. I forced a smile. "I understand. I've been looking, I really have. I'm just trying not to jump at the first thing that feels like another wrong fit." Josh cleared his throat but said nothing. Melissa took another dainty sip of wine. "Sometimes jumping is the only way to find out." Dad leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. I came down here thinking you two were just stressed, not that Claire was being pushed out. No one's pushing, Melissa replied smoothly. We're just naming what's already happening. Josh finally spoke. Maybe now's not the time. Her eyes flicked to him. When would be? His mouth opened, then closed. Again, the silence that followed was suffocating. I picked at the edge of my napkin. I appreciate you both letting me stay. I'll figure things out. Dad's face was clouded now. He looked between all of us and let out a slow breath, the kind that always came before he changed the subject. You know, I passed that old used bookstore on 7th, still there after all these years. Remember when you dragged me in there during the heat wave? I smiled. Barely. Melissa rose from the table, collecting plates like the conversation had been just a formality. Josh stood too, starting to help. Dad stayed seated. I did too. He looked at me, really looked. You okay? He asked under his breath. I nodded once. But the truth was, I didn't know. I didn't know how to hold my voice in a house where every sentence was a negotiation, where even gratitude had strings attached, where Melissa could talk about balance while never acknowledging the way the scales had always been tilted. That night, as I cleaned up the dishes alone, I could still hear her voice in my head. Next steps. Comfort isn't permanent. And just like that, the warmth Dad had brought with him began to slip through my fingers like sand. The fan above me spun slowly, casting soft, rhythmic shadows across the ceiling like ghost hands waving in the dark. I lay on my back in the guest room, sheets pulled to my chin, trying not to breathe too loudly. Every sound outside my door felt louder than it was. The groan of the floorboards, the tick of the thermostat, the occasional clink of dishes being moved in the kitchen long after dinner had ended. I'd said goodnight hours ago, but sleep wouldn't come, not when the silence felt so loaded. And then through the paper-thin walls I heard them, Josh's voice low and weary. She's trying. And Melissa's reply quiet but sharp enough to slice air. She acts like this is her place. I stopped breathing. There was a pause, then the sound of something being put down gently, maybe a glass. I didn't say that, Josh murmured. No, but you're thinking it. Mel, she leaves her tea mugs everywhere. Uses the master bathroom when she thinks I'm not home. Folds your laundry like she's trying to prove something. She's your sister-in-law. She's your sister, Melissa snapped. She's not mine. My chest tightened. I pressed my hand to my stomach as if that could hold me together. Josh's voice was so soft I had to strain to hear it. This isn't easy for her, Melissa scoffed. And it's a dream for me. I didn't sign up to host your sister indefinitely. She's family. Melissa didn't respond to that. The silence that followed was different. Dense. Not just uncomfortable, but final. I turned onto my side, blinking at the pale glow of the moon sneaking through the blinds. My eyes burned. Not from tears, those had stopped a while ago, but from exhaustion. From swallowing myself whole every day, trying to take up less space, be more helpful, less inconvenient, more silent. But it didn't matter. No matter how softly I stepped, how perfectly I folded, how little I asked for, I was the problem. I was the weight in the house no one could name aloud. I'd convinced myself I was buying time here, regrouping, resetting. But tonight, for the first time, I let the truth settle in. They didn't see me as healing. They saw me as hiding. And worse, as taking their space, their time, their patience. I sat up slowly, the sheets falling away. The air felt too still, too clean. Like the room had been staged for someone else's life. Someone more graceful, more grateful, more easily digested. I looked around. The books I had stacked neatly in the corner. My laptop, always closed, never left open. My clothes still in a duffel instead of the closet I'd never even unpacked. Because somewhere deep down I'd known. I was never meant to stay. I walked to the mirror, the one that Melissa had moved from the hallway into my room 2 weeks ago, out of sight, out of mind. I stared at my own reflection. My eyes looked older than 32, duller. The woman looking back at me wasn't me. Not the me I used to be. She looked like someone waiting for permission, to breathe, to exist, to leave. A sound in the hallway made me step back, breath caught, more silence. Then the faint sound of their bedroom door closing, final, certain. I pressed my palm against the wall and whispered, "I hear you," because I did, louder than anything they said to my face. The next afternoon, I waited until the sun was high enough to feel like a promise. The sky stretched bright and endless over the backyard, making even the cracked patio stones look forgiving. Maybe that was what gave me the courage. Or maybe it was the ache in my chest that had grown too loud to ignore. Melissa was in the garden, seated in one of the iron chairs beside her rose beds. Her hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, phone in hand, thumbs scrolling with surgical precision. She wore sunglasses and a cardigan despite the heat. I stood at the sliding glass door for a second longer than necessary, heart thudding like a trapped bird. Then I stepped outside. The sunlight was blinding, the garden too green, too still. "Hey," I said gently. She didn't look up. I tried again. "Melissa." She slowly lowered her phone, her expression unreadable behind dark lenses. I clasped my hands in front of me. "Do you have a minute?" She crossed her legs and gave a tight nod. "Sure." I took a breath. I wanted to ask if we could talk, just start over. Melissa tilted her head slightly. "Start over." "Yeah, things have been tense, I know that. I haven't been perfect, but I never meant to make your home feel," I swallowed. "Crowded, I came here in pieces and I've been trying to find my footing again." She said nothing. "I just thought maybe we could try a fresh slate," I continued. "I don't want to be in the way. I just want to feel like I'm not an outsider in my own brother's house." A pause. A breath, then she looked back at her phone. "Go away." The words hit like a slap. "What?" Melissa didn't lift her eyes. "This isn't a shelter, Claire." I stood there, stunned. "I wasn't asking for charity. You were asking for forgiveness without admitting fault," she interrupted, her voice flat. "That's not a conversation, that's manipulation." "I'm trying," I said, heat rising in my face. "No, you're performing," she said. "And I'm tired." I couldn't speak. The roses behind her swayed in the breeze, too red, too alive. Melissa scrolled again, one hand resting lightly on her thigh. "Josh won't say anything because he's soft, but I'm not. This has gone on long enough." "So that's it." She glanced up finally, pushing her sunglasses to the top of her head. Her eyes were sharper than I'd ever seen them. "You want a different answer. Start acting like a grown-up and stop pretending we're friends. We're family." She smiled, small, cold. "That doesn't make us allies." I stood frozen in the doorway of the afternoon, the sun scorching the back of my neck. I had opened myself like a wound, and she had poured salt, then turned away. There was nothing left to say. The roses swayed gently behind her. The sky was still too blue, and somewhere inside me something quiet snapped. Not in anger, in certainty. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. There was no dramatic scene, no shouting match, no slammed doors. Just the quiet scrape of a zipper, the soft shuffle of my suitcase wheels over the tile, and my heartbeat thudding like a clock ticking down to freedom. The air in the house felt still, staged, like a set waiting for the next act. Melissa was in the kitchen, humming under her breath as she organized spice jars. Josh wasn't home. That made it easier. I'd rehearsed what I'd say if she noticed. "I'm heading out for some air." But she didn't look up when I walked past her. And for once, I didn't stop to fill the silence. The Arizona heat hit me like a wave as I stepped outside. The sky was too bright, the driveway glaring white. I hauled my bag to the curb, my palms sweating, and sat on the low brick wall beside the mailbox. The bus stop was 5 blocks away, but I needed a moment to feel the weight of leaving, to believe it was real. My phone buzzed in my pocket, 3 unread messages from Josh. "Josh, where are you?" "Josh, Melissa said you stormed out." "Josh, what's going on? Why are you acting like this?" I read them twice, the words twisting in my gut. Why are you acting like this? As if his silence hadn't been its own kind of noise. As if every moment I'd swallowed hadn't been an act of restraint. I locked the screen without replying and kept walking. By the time I reached the bus stop, sweat clung to my spine and my throat burned with dry air. I dropped my bag beside me and sat on the faded bench, staring at the stretch of desert road. Everything shimmered in the heat, like a mirage, like a dream dissolving. When the bus arrived, I climbed aboard with one small suitcase and one heavy truth. I was done being the problem in someone else's story. The motel was 5 blocks from downtown Phoenix. One of those old roadside ones with chipped paint and a flickering neon sign that buzzed VAC NCY because the A had burned out. The air smelled like dust and old carpet. My room was cold from an overworked air conditioner that hummed like a lullaby for lost souls. The first thing I did was sit on the bed and breathe. No voices, no footsteps, no judgment, just quiet. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. The tears had dried somewhere between the mailbox and the bus ride. Now there was just an ache, dull, constant, and strangely liberating. I checked my phone again. 2 more texts from Josh. One from Dad, "Call me when you can. Your brother's worried." Melissa hadn't messaged me. Of course she hadn't. I lay back against the stiff pillow, staring at the ceiling stains shaped like continents. The hum of the air conditioner filled the room like static, and for the first time in months I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Peace. It wasn't pretty peace. It was raw and fragile, like a glass you're afraid to touch. But it was mine. On the nightstand sat a small notepad with the motel's name printed in fading blue ink. I tore off the top sheet and wrote 2 words in the center. Never again. Never again would I beg to belong. Never again would I shrink to fit inside someone else's comfort. Never again would I mistake silence for safety. The next morning, I walked to a nearby diner, the kind with sticky menus and coffee that tasted like burnt hope. I ordered eggs, toast, and a side of clarity. I didn't have much of a plan yet, but I had something better than a plan, the will to start one. The waitress, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag that said Ruby, refilled my coffee and asked, "You passing through or staying a while?" I smiled faintly. "Not sure yet." "Well," she said, topping off my cup, "sometimes staying a while's how you figure it out." Maybe she was right, because as I sat there watching the morning light spill across the linoleum, I realized something simple and profound. I hadn't lost everything. I'd left it. A week later, I signed the papers with a pen that didn't shake. The real estate agent, a calm woman named Dana with salt and pepper hair and almond-shaped eyes, slid the final document across the table. "Initial here," she said, pointing to the bottom corner. I glanced at the line, then up at her. "How soon until it lists?" "We can have it live by Friday," she said. "Photos go up tomorrow, the market's strong, you'll get plenty of interest." I nodded once, firm. "Good, no delays." She smiled, polite but curious. "Most clients are a little more sentimental when selling a property." I didn't answer that. Because what do you say when the house you're selling is still full of your brother's things? Of Melissa's succulents lined up like trophies on the kitchen window. Of guest towels I'd bought as a holiday gift last year, now hanging in the bathroom like little ghosts. Of family portraits that never once included me. What do you say when the place you invested in years ago, the one you gifted as a temporary lifeboat for your brother's new marriage, became the stage of your quiet exile? You say nothing. You let the sales speak for you. The house had always technically been mine. I'd purchased it 5 years ago, back when things were simpler. Josh was just getting married. I was working in Seattle and didn't need the space, and the Arizona market was too good to ignore. He'd offered to pay rent. I declined. "Family doesn't pay," I'd said, famous last words. When I'd moved in a few months ago, it was supposed to be temporary. Melissa had agreed, smiling thinly as she offered me the guest room and said, "Of course, whatever Claire needs." Now I wondered if she ever really meant it, but it didn't matter anymore because the sale was happening, and for once I wasn't asking permission. By the following Tuesday, the listing went live. I didn't tell them. I didn't need to, but the family group chat did. "Josh, Claire, are you selling the house? Melissa, why is there a for sale sign on our lawn? Dad, Claire. What's happening? Josh, I thought you said you just needed space. What is this, an eviction notice?" The messages came fast, one after another. First confusion, then panic, then silence. I didn't respond. Instead, I watched from the distance, just as they had watched me unravel under their roof without stepping in. The movers arrived Thursday. 2 men in blue shirts and matching caps carried boxes out the front door while neighbors slowed their cars to stare. Melissa's rose bushes were still in bloom, but they looked out of place now, like something trying to stay rooted in soil that had already been sold. I didn't go near the house, didn't peek through curtains, didn't drive by, didn't answer when Josh called 4 times in one day. Let them wonder. Let them feel the stillness where I used to fill space. Let them sit in the echo of my absence. Later that night, a message popped up from Josh. "Josh, I didn't know it was this bad. Josh, you could have told me. Josh, I would have listened." I read it once, then turned off my phone, because the time to listen had passed. And for the first time in months, I had nothing left to explain. The holidays came like they always do, slow at first, then suddenly all at once. Pumpkin-scented candles lined supermarket shelves. Coffee shops rolled out their spiced lattes. The radio started playing jingles I used to hum without thinking. But this year, everything felt quieter. Not just for me, for them too. Thanksgiving passed without fanfare. I didn't go. I wasn't invited either, but that didn't surprise me. What surprised me was the silence. Not even Dad texted that day. Not even Josh. I imagined the table. Melissa's gold-accented place settings, her roasted garlic mashed potatoes, the signature apple tart she'd picked up from that bakery on 8th. I imagined Dad at the end of the table, wearing his Turkey King apron. I imagined Josh filling his plate twice, pretending not to notice the tension under the surface. And I imagined my chair, empty. Did they set it? Did anyone glance toward it? Did Melissa casually mention that I was off doing her own thing while sipping her wine and smoothing down her napkin? Or did no one speak my name at all? I pictured it vividly. The long stretches of silence between bites, the awkward scraping of forks, Josh checking his phone a few too many times, Melissa pretending not to care. Maybe it was the first meal in that house where the quiet wasn't coming from me. I wondered what they talked about, if they laughed, if they missed me. And the strangest part? I didn't miss them. Not in the way I thought I would. Not in the way that gnaws and pulls and makes you want to go crawling back just to belong again. No, I missed the idea of them. The illusion of family. The hope that eventually I'd be seen without having to explain myself. But illusions are loud until they're gone. Then they leave an echo. That weekend, I walked through a small arts market downtown, sipping hot cider from a paper cup. Couples strolled by wrapped in scarves, children clutched kettle corn in sticky fists, and a jazz trio played near a booth selling hand-woven rugs. The world moved on without me needing to catch up. And still, somewhere far away, I knew they were finally feeling my absence. Not because I left in anger. Not because I yelled or demanded or tried to prove anything. But because I disappeared and didn't come back. That kind of silence lingers. It makes people re-examine their versions of events. It makes them wonder when the shift began what words they missed, what signals they ignored. It leaves them with the worst kind of question. What if I was wrong? A few days after Thanksgiving, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Josh's. Inside was a short note, scrawled in blue ink. It was strange without you. Dad kept looking at your seat. Melissa made your tart recipe. We didn't say your name, but you were everywhere. Josh, I read it once, twice. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in my drawer next to the motel notepad that still said, never again. Let them miss me. Let them sit with the silence they helped build. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't theirs anymore either. It was a Monday. The kind where the air smells like rain even when it hasn't fallen yet and everything feels like it's waiting for something. I was home early from work, my keys still in my hand, when I heard the knock. 3 soft raps, hesitant. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the peephole and my breath caught. Melissa. She stood there in a long coat, her shoulders hunched forward, damp curls clinging to her forehead. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but like something in her had deflated. I didn't move. I wasn't sure if I wanted to open the door, then I did, slowly. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and glassy. Her lips trembled slightly, like she'd been practicing what to say but still wasn't ready. "Hi," she whispered. I stepped back just enough for her to enter. She walked in like she didn't know how to stand anymore, stiff, careful, unsure of the ground beneath her. I closed the door and leaned against it, arms folded, saying nothing. She started, then stopped. Her voice cracked. She pressed a tissue to her face and turned away. "I was jealous," she said finally. The words dropped between us like something fragile and strange. "I saw the way you were with Josh, the way your dad lit up around you. I felt like I was always watching the two of you speak a language I didn't understand." She let out a soft, ugly laugh. "It made me mean. I didn't know how to say it, so I made it your fault." I stayed silent, not because I didn't want to speak, but because for once she was saying the things I'd carried for both of us. "I told myself you were invading, that you were ungrateful. But I was the one protecting my space like it was some kind of throne. And now, she looked up at me, her eyes glistening. I'm pregnant. The room froze. She placed a trembling hand over her stomach. Just a few weeks, it wasn't planned. Josh is thrilled, I'm terrified. I blinked, trying to process what she wasn't saying. I'm not here to fix anything, she said quickly. I know I don't deserve that, I needed you to know, I needed you to hear it from me. I swallowed, the lump in my throat sharp and dry. I'm not asking for me, she added softly. I'm asking for her. The pronoun hit me like a whisper and a thunderclap all at once. Her, this unborn child, this daughter, this possible future built on the wreckage we left behind. I didn't move, didn't cry, didn't forgive her, not yet, but I didn't close the door either. We sat on the couch eventually. She talked. I listened. I poured 2 glasses of wine and she declined. I sipped mine slowly, the bitter edge grounding me. She said she didn't expect anything from me. She said she wouldn't bring it up again. And still, she'd come. Because deep down, she knew something had changed. That power had shifted. That silence could speak, but presence could choose whether to answer or not. When she left, I didn't promise to stay in touch. I just held the door open, gently, and watched her disappear into the fog. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. There was something quiet inside me, not peace exactly, but something steadier. Like the ground beneath me had stopped trembling. Like I could finally exhale without flinching. I opened the curtains and stood there for a long time, watching the light change everything it touched. The roof lines across the street, the power lines, the sidewalk cracks, they all glowed gold just for a moment. It reminded me of how things can still be beautiful even when they're broken. My phone buzzed on the dresser. Not a call, not a text. Just a photo I'd forgotten I saved months ago. The white bungalow I'd passed every day on my way to work, the one with the wraparound porch and jasmine bushes that bloomed like stars. It had been for sale then. And now it wasn't. It was mine. I bought it quietly 2 weeks after the motel with the money from the house sale. I hadn't told anyone. I didn't owe them that. But now I had something I needed to say. I walked out to the porch, barefoot, the air cool against my skin. Snapped a photo of the front door and the light spilling out behind me. No filters, no hashtags, just a caption for my niece, that was all. No one liked it at first. No one commented, but I knew they saw it. I imagined Melissa reading the words and freezing, understanding what they meant, that the silence wasn't punishment anymore. It wasn't revenge. It was a choice, a reclamation. The house wasn't for Melissa. It wasn't a peace offering. It wasn't even forgiveness. It was for her child. A new generation that hadn't yet learned how to weaponize love. A clean slate, a soft landing. Something that didn't come from guilt or debt or performance but from clarity. I didn't need to be a part of their table anymore. I had built my own. Later that week, Josh texted, "Josh, I saw the post." "Josh, thank you, Josh, you didn't have to." I stared at the messages for a while before replying. "Claire, I know, that's why it matters. No more explanations. No more chasing peace inside rooms where I wasn't welcome. I wasn't asking to be let back in. I was showing them I'd already stepped out and stayed whole. The family didn't call. No one visited, and that was okay, because the house stood, bright and white and open, a place that whispered of second chances but didn't beg for anyone to take them. It simply existed, like me. 1 year later, the garden had started to bloom. Not just sprout, not just stretch, but truly bloom. Jasmine vines climbed the porch rails like they had always belonged there. The lavender bushes spilled over the edge of the path, brushing ankles and releasing their scent like a blessing. The crepe myrtle in the front yard had finally bloomed, 2 bright pink blossoms that refused to be ignored. And there she was, my niece. Tiny shoes thudding against the flagstone walkway, curls bouncing with each unsteady step. Her laugh, sharp, high, and completely her own, cut through the air like sunlight through a window you forgot was there. She toddled forward, arms out like wings, eyes wide with delight. "Come on," she called, though she could barely pronounce it yet. I smiled and followed her slowly. She didn't know the history wrapped into the soil beneath her feet. She didn't know how many battles had been buried between these rose beds and porch beams. She didn't know that the path she danced across used to be the line I couldn't cross. She just knew it was home. Melissa watched from the porch, her hand resting lightly on her belly, round again with another child on the way. She didn't say much anymore when she visited, and I didn't ask her to. Some wounds don't need to be dissected to be healed. Some just need time and distance. And sunlight. We didn't talk about the house she lost or the one I built. We didn't revisit who said what, who hurt who stayed silent. We just passed the baby between us and let her laughter rewrite what came before. Josh came occasionally, sometimes with Dad, sometimes alone. He always brought flowers now, real ones, not gas station bouquets. He always said thank you when he left. He never asked for explanations. I think he finally understood. There are some truths that arrive only after the storm, some lessons that can't be shouted, they have to be lived. I picked up my niece and pointed to the blooms by the gate. You see those, I whispered. Those are called zinnias. They're stubborn. They grow even when you forget to water them. She nodded solemnly, her tiny hands clutching the fabric of my shirt. And those, I turned her slightly, pointing to the shaded corner by the porch. Those are foxgloves. They look delicate, but they're strong. People don't always know how strong. She blinked up at me, then smiled. We walked to the back of the house together, her legs bouncing against my hip. I opened the gate to the backyard and stepped into the space I had worked on for nearly a year. The old chain-link fence was gone, replaced by wooden panels with climbing ivy. A swing hung from the sturdy oak tree I had planted from a seedling. There were garden beds, a bench under a trellis, and in the far corner a little painted sign. "Grow wild." She squirmed down from my arms and ran to it, patting the wooden letters with delight. I stood there, barefoot on the grass, the wind stirring my shirt and lifting the scent of rosemary from the herb box beside me. This was what I'd built. Not just a home, a legacy, a whisper of strength woven into every corner. A place that didn't ask me to disappear, didn't make me prove my worth, didn't shrink me to fit inside someone else's definition of love. This place said, "You belong, full-sized, fully formed, as is." My niece ran back to me, clutching a yellow flower she'd yanked too early. She held it up proudly. "Yours," she said. I knelt beside her, took the crumpled flower in my hand, and smiled. "No," I said, "this is yours." Because dignity doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it walks barefoot through a garden you planted yourself. Sometimes it lives in silence. And sometimes it whispers through the laughter of a child who will never know the storm she was born after. But she'll grow just the same, and maybe even wilder.